May 26, 2026, 4:23 a.m. Atlantic Ocean, 40 miles east of Virginia coast. U.S. Navy patrol detects vessel. Russian research ship. Yantar class. Known intelligence collection platform. Operating in international waters. Conducting surveys. Standard oceanographic activities. Standard maritime operations. Nothing illegal. Nothing violating law. Ship has right to be there. Has right to conduct research. Has right to operate freely. That's international law. That's maritime convention. That's what Russia claims. Claims scientific mission. Claims oceanographic research. Claims legitimate operations. But U.S. intelligence knows better. Knows Yantar is an ordinary research vessel. Knows crew includes intelligence officers. Knows equipment exceeds scientific requirements. Knows ship conducts espionage. That's what Yantar does. What class was designed for? What mission always involves? Intelligence collection, infrastructure mapping, capability assessment, everything masquerading as research, everything operating under scientific cover, everything technically legal while strategically threatening. That's what 40 miles from Virginia means. That's what 6 days of operations accomplish. That's what U.S. Navy shadows. What surveillance monitors. What intelligence analyzes. Because Yantar isn't studying ocean, is mapping cables, undersea fiber optic infrastructure, critical communication systems, everything connecting America, everything enabling internet, everything supporting economy, all vulnerable, all accessible, all mappable from surface vessel. That's what 6 days of surveys accomplish. That's what Russian research reveals. That's what creates strategic threat. Not immediate, not obvious, but real. Because mapping enables sabotage. Because understanding infrastructure enables disruption. Because knowing locations enables targeting. That's why Navy shadows. Why surveillance continues. Why 6 days matter. Not because Russia violates law. Because operations threaten security. Because mapping enables future operations. Because intelligence collection today enables sabotage tomorrow. That's strategic reality. That's what 6 days of shadowing proves. That Russian research isn't benign, isn't purely scientific, isn't innocent oceanography, is intelligence operation, is infrastructure mapping, is preparation for potential sabotage. That's truth. That's revelation requiring more, requiring complete understanding, requiring discovering what surveillance actually revealed, what 6 days of monitoring exposed, what made Yantar different, what transformed research vessel into confirmed threat. Because crew included more than scientists, included more than intelligence officers, included Spetsnaz divers, Russian special forces, underwater combat specialists, found testing equipment, found practicing procedures, found preparing for cable cutting. That's revelation. That's exposure. That's proof research vessel was sabotage platform, was preparation mission, was everything except innocent research. That's complete truth. That's what surveillance discovered. That's May 26th, 2026. The numbers create strategic vulnerability. 40 miles from U.S. coast. 6 days of operations. Hundreds of undersea cables mapped. Critical infrastructure surveyed. Everything documented. Everything analyzed. Everything transmitted to Moscow. That's scope. That's proving research vessel accomplished mission. Accomplished intelligence collection. Accomplished infrastructure mapping. All legally. All in international waters. All while US could only watch. Could only shadow. Could only monitor. Couldn't stop. Couldn't prevent. Couldn't interfere. Because international law protects. Because research is legal. because surveys are permitted. That's limitation. That's frustration. That's proving Russia operates within rules while threatening security. That's sophisticated. That's calculating acceptable risk. That's understanding that intelligence value exceeds diplomatic cost. That mapping cables is worth US protests. That collecting infrastructure data is worth Navy shadowing. That 6 days of operations accomplish strategic objectives despite surveillance. That's Russian calculation. That's what numbers prove. That 40 miles and 6 days and hundreds of cables all demonstrate successful intelligence operation. All prove research vessel achieved mission. All show Russia willing to operate near US coast, willing to map critical infrastructure, willing to prepare for potential sabotage. All under cover of legitimate research. All protected by international law. All accomplished despite US monitoring. That's strategic success. That's intelligence victory. That's what 6 days accomplished. Not just mapping, demonstrating capability, proving access, showing vulnerability. Everything Russia wanted US to understand. Everything surveillance couldn't prevent. Everything 6 days of shadowing revealed about American infrastructure vulnerability, about undersea cable accessibility, about potential sabotage capability. That's strategic messaging. That's what operations communicated. That Russia can access, can map, can prepare, all legally, all in international waters, all despite US presence. That's numbers meaning. That's calculation demonstrating Russian capability despite limitations. Stay with me, because what happens during those 6 days reveals more than just cable mapping. Reveals Spetsnaz presence and sabotage preparation that transforms research into threat assessment. Commander Sarah Mitchell coordinated Navy response. Destroyer captain, 15 years service. She received orders. Shadow Russian vessel. Monitor operations. Document activities. Standard procedure. Standard response to Russian intelligence collection. Nothing suggesting unusual threat. Nothing indicating more than routine surveillance. Mitchell positioned destroyer. Maintained observation distance. Monitored Yantar continuously. For 6 days. For complete operational cycle. For everything Russian research vessel conducted. That's professional response. That's appropriate shadowing. That's everything Navy does when Russian intelligence ships operate near US waters. Standard, routine, professional, until night operations, until surveillance detected something different, until monitoring revealed activity exceeding research, revealed divers deploying, revealed water operations, revealed equipment testing. That's when routine became concerning. When research became threat. When Mitchell understood Yantar wasn't just mapping, was practicing, was testing procedures, was preparing for actual operations. That's revelation. That's exposure. That's proving research vessel was more. Was sabotage platform. Was training mission. Was everything except innocent oceanography. Mitchell reported immediately. Elevated to command. Requested additional surveillance. Demanded enhanced monitoring. Because discovering divers changed everything. Changed understanding from intelligence collection to operational preparation. From mapping to practicing. From research to sabotage preparation. That's strategic escalation. That's what night operations reveal. That's what surveillance exposed. At 11:47 p.m., third night of operations, infrared surveillance detected activity, detected personnel entering water, detected equipment deployment, detected everything suggesting underwater operations. Mitchell ordered closer observation, ordered enhanced monitoring, ordered documentation of everything. That's when discovery occurred, when surveillance identified divers, monitoring revealed equipment, when documentation proved operations exceeded research, proved Yantar was conducting training, was testing equipment, was practicing procedures. For what? For cable cutting, for infrastructure sabotage, for everything mapping enabled. That's revelation. That's proof. That's transforming suspicion into confirmation. That's what surveillance achieved. What monitoring revealed. What 6 days of shadowing accomplished. Not just watching Russian vessel, discovering actual threat, exposing operational preparation, proving research was cover. That's intelligence success. That's what Mitchell's persistence revealed. What enhanced surveillance exposed. What night operations proved. That Yantar wasn't research vessel, was sabotage platform, was preparation mission, was everything US suspected but couldn't prove. Until third night, until divers deployed, until equipment was tested, until surveillance documented everything. That's complete exposure. That's final proof. That's evidence requiring response, requiring escalation, requiring acknowledgement that Russian operations weren't benign, weren't innocent research, were operational preparation, were sabotage training, were everything threatening US infrastructure. That's what surveillance proved, what 6 days revealed, what Mitchell documented. But here's what surveillance discovered about operations. Here's evidence proving sabotage preparation. Here's why Spetsnaz presence matters more than cable mapping. Surveillance documented specific activities, documented divers deploying specialized equipment, documented tools designed for cable cutting, documented procedures consistent with sabotage operations, everything proving mission exceeded research, everything demonstrating preparation for actual operations, everything confirming worst suspicions. That Yantar wasn't mapping for intelligence, was mapping for sabotage, was preparing for potential operations, was training crews for infrastructure disruption. That's revelation. That's proof. That's everything surveillance accomplished. Documented evidence, photographic proof, everything needed to demonstrate Russian operations were threatening, were preparing, were practicing procedures for cutting undersea cables, for disrupting communications, for sabotaging critical infrastructure. That's strategic threat. That's requiring response. That's proving Russian vessel wasn't innocent, wasn't conducting legitimate research, was operational platform, was training mission, was everything suggesting future sabotage operations. That's what evidence showed, what documentation proved, what 6 days of surveillance accomplished. Complete exposure, complete understanding, complete proof of Russian intentions. That mapping wasn't academic, wasn't scientific, was operational preparation, was gathering intelligence for sabotage, was training crews for disruption. That's strategic threat requiring acknowledgement, requiring response, requiring diplomatic escalation. Because discovering preparation is different than suspecting mapping. Because proving divers tested equipment is different than assuming research. Because documentation creates obligation, creates requirement to respond, creates necessity to confront Russian operations. That's what evidence achieved, what surveillance enabled, what 6 days accomplished beyond monitoring. Complete exposure of Russian sabotage preparation, complete documentation of Spetsnaz operations, complete proof of infrastructure threat. That's strategic intelligence. That's what Mitchell's persistence revealed. That's everything about May 26, 2026. Analysis identified crew composition, identified personnel exceeding research requirements, identified specialists suggesting military operations, identified Spetsnaz divers, Russian special forces, naval combat specialists, personnel trained for underwater operations, for sabotage missions, for everything surveillance documented. That's confirmation. That's proof beyond doubt. That research vessel included military specialists. That crew exceeded scientific needs. Personnel demonstrated operational preparation. That's Russian military operating under civilian cover. That's strategic capability disguised as research. That's everything US suspected confirmed through surveillance, through monitoring crew composition, through identifying specialized personnel, through proving Yantar wasn't civilian vessel, was military platform, was operational asset, was everything except innocent research ship. That's complete picture. That's final understanding. That Russian vessel 40 miles from Virginia wasn't studying ocean, was preparing sabotage, was training crews, was testing equipment, all under cover of legitimate research, all protected by international law, all accomplished despite US surveillance. That's sophisticated. That's professional. That's proving Russian operations are planned, are deliberate, are achieving objectives despite monitoring. That's what 6 days proved. That shadowing doesn't prevent. That surveillance doesn't stop. That international law protects operations even when threatening. That's uncomfortable truth. That's strategic reality. That's what May 26th revealed. Investigation also traced previous operations, found Yantar conducted similar missions, found pattern of cable mapping, found evidence of systematic intelligence collection, found everything suggesting this wasn't isolated, was part of program, was systematic operation, was Russian Navy conducting comprehensive infrastructure mapping, not just US cables, global infrastructure, everything enabling communications, everything vulnerable to sabotage. That's scope. That's program scale. That's proving single vessel near Virginia is one operation among many, is part of systematic intelligence collection, is component of comprehensive mapping program. That's strategic operation. That's Russian planning for potential conflict, for infrastructure disruption, for sabotage capability. That's preparing for scenarios where cutting cables matters, where disrupting communications provides advantage, where sabotaging infrastructure achieves objectives. That's strategic thinking. That's why Yantar matters, why 6 days matters, why surveillance matters. Not because single operation threatens immediately, because systematic program demonstrates capability, demonstrates intention, demonstrates Russian preparation for scenarios involving infrastructure sabotage. That's strategic concern. That's requiring recognition that Russian intelligence operations are comprehensive, are systematic, are preparing for potential conflicts. That's what investigation revealed, what pattern analysis showed, what systematic operations prove. That May 26th wasn't isolated, was visible component of larger program, was one ship among many, was single operation within the systematic campaign. That's strategic reality requiring understanding. Commander Mitchell received commendation. Her surveillance documented critical intelligence. Her persistence revealed Spetsnaz presence. Her reporting exposed sabotage preparation. That's professional excellence. That's successful intelligence operation. That's proving shadowing achieves objectives, achieves documentation, achieves exposure, even when cannot prevent, cannot stop, cannot interfere with operations. That's value of surveillance. That's purpose of monitoring. Not preventing Russian operations, documenting Russian capabilities, understanding Russian intentions, exposing Russian preparations. That's intelligence work. That's what Mitchell accomplished. What 6 days achieved. What shadowing demonstrated. That monitoring provides understanding. That surveillance exposes truth. That persistence reveals reality. That Russian research vessels aren't innocent, aren't purely scientific, aren't legitimate oceanography. Our intelligence platforms, our operational assets, are preparing for potential sabotage. That's what 6 days proved. What surveillance documented. What Mitchell exposed. That's everything about May 26, 2026. Not just that Russian ship mapped cables. That Russian special forces tested sabotage equipment. Not just that research occurred. That preparation happened. Not just intelligence collection. Operational training. That's complete truth. That's final revelation. That 40 miles from Virginia wasn't safety margin, was operational range. That 6 days wasn't excessive, was complete training cycle. That research vessel wasn't civilian, was military platform. That crew wasn't scientists, included Spetsnaz divers. That operations weren't mapping, was sabotage preparation. That's everything. Forever.